disease is taking root at that time. And if we're not addressing it then we're getting the diagnosis later on. That's what we need to get people to understand, is everybody's waiting. They're waiting for the diagnosis. That's the problem.
All behavior makes sense. But when we understand kind of how we're wired as human beings, and all of a sudden a lot of things that seem counterintuitive, they actually make a lot of sense.
Follow the fitness marketing model. It's like, here's this photo of me. I look this way because I eat these things and I do this exercise. You can just do that same thing too. And then when you show up and find out that that's not going to work for you.
All right, we are live. I just got to add us back into this. Really funny. We have every guest is special, but this one's kind of a unique topic because rarely do we hear hypnotism spoken about sort of in a medical or health-related context. It still seems to be a fringe art, and so I wanted to bring Trisha on to discuss a little bit about what it is that she does. But let's throw you into the deep end, Trisha, and say, why don't you give us a little bit of backstory about what it is that you do and how you ended up doing this as a practice?
Oh, well, we'll rewind probably, oh my goodness, how old's my youngest child? My story starts with having children. I ended up with 2 cesareans with my first 2 childbirths. And I kind of felt broken and like betrayed. And the whole medical system was like, and to be fair, I worked in the medical system at the time. I'm a lab and x-ray technician originally. So I really believed that I should be doing what I was told to do from the people around me. And then to my horror, I didn't get the outcomes that I wanted. So fast forward to like baby number 3, and I'm like, darn it, I'm going to do this better. And, I had tried several times the second one. But because I had never dealt with the emotional content of what had happened the first time, my poor little child was like, no, this woman is crazy. And she planted her feet in my pelvis and she's like, I'm not coming out. So I ended up recreating essentially what had happened the first time. On baby number 3, though, I did do a lot of emotional work, and through hypnosis and through a hypnotic childbirth program that focused on hypnosis for childbirth as well as prenatal education. And I achieved what is kind of unheard of, which is a vaginal birth after cesarean. And my
after 2 cesareans.
Yeah. And my mind kind of just went, oh my God, like this is life changing. And when I went back to my day job, I just started realizing, oh my God, like I can't do it this way. Like people it's great in the system. But I needed to help people more. I couldn't help them in the profession that I was in. And so then I started to I became an instructor for the childbirth program. I was the first instructor in Alberta, as well as a hypno doula. Then I started expanding my teaching skills. And then I became a hypnotist and hypnotist trainer with the Master Hypnotist Society under Scott McFall, and he's out of Orlando. I helped co-create the Master Hypnotist Society Canada. And so I'm part of like 3 instructors and trainers in Canada. But we're part of a big organization that has like the same philosophies. And if you went to any of the MHS clinics across Canada and the US, you should get the same kind of results. What was the other question that you posed? You asked me what I do.
How does it work? Like, so I think
yeah, well, I mean, because that's like a pretty cool backstory, and I think what I love about it is this wasn't, I don't know, it was born of a need. You went through an experience and you go, this is how the system failed me, and I want to do something different. I want to be an agent for change, and I want to help to create something different, maybe a different paradigm or perspective on health and wellness, and that led you to kind of where you are today. But it took going through like a really difficult, and I think that's a lot of people's stories when they get into a practice like this is, I had this experience and I felt like helpless or frustrated or yet totally underserved or misunderstood. And now I'm on this mission to create change.
Absolutely. And it was a driving force. Like once I cracked that amount of information, I was like, oh my God. I was just like a bullet. I had to keep on learning more and learning more and learning more. And I'm almost in 11 years now of doing this, of having the business open. And to be fair, I came from a really small town and everybody's like, you're opening a hypnosis business? Oh my God, you're crazy. And you're leaving like a $30+ an hour job. Like, who does that? I'm like, apparently me. So yeah, now I commute and I teach online as well as do sessions online as well as in the regular clinics. So, and to answer the question of what hypnosis can help solve, well, change is change. So everything is kind of the same and different simultaneously. So we do appeal to people who are, especially during the New Year's season, weight loss, stop smoking, stress management, pain management with doctor's referral, as well as like confidence and sleep and motivation, performance anxieties. Like it's a very broad scope, of course, of what we can help, but we're not pretending to solve like major illness or anything like that. These are about creating purposeful change and helping people achieve the outcomes that they want to achieve. So they come into the clinic. What we do is a free screening to see if hypnosis is a good option for them. And during that time, we kind of educate them a little bit about what hypnosis is, what hypnosis isn't, show that it's not mind control and that all hypnosis is self-hypnosis, do a little hypnotic test to make sure that they're physically capable, and then design a program that fits their time and their budget.
So what would prevent someone from being a suitable candidate for hypnosis?
That was my question, actually.
Right.
Ask that
And deliberately avoiding the term hypnotherapy, because we had a conversation before, and I believe that you very strongly avoid using the term hypnotherapy. And maybe we could have a quick sidetrack and say, why is that?
Well, the truth is nobody really wants to be therapized. And in the beginning, when they started using the term, the field really wanted to align themselves with science and medicine instead of an art. And now, even if you go on the NGH, the National Guild of Hypnotism, they consider us consulting hypnotists, or like with MHS, we're master hypnotists. The hypnotism term or hypnosis term is far, far better than hypnotherapy. Even though we've come a long way with, mental health, people still would far rather say, like, it's far more exciting to say, oh my God, I'm going to a hypnotist, than to say I'm going to therapy, So, and in the beginning, a lot of people thought the word hypnotherapy meant like water therapy. So there was a lot of confusion around the term, but when you say the word hypnotism, a lot of people understand it a lot more. Like they understand that it's using hypnosis.
So then, yeah, what would disqualify someone from being a candidate for hypnosis? And maybe a second question would be, those who are incapable of hypnotized, is there like a structural deficit in the brain, or what is it that would prevent someone from even being able to be hypnotized?
Those are fantastic questions. So the truth is that the worst possible candidate for hypnosis is the person who wants to prove they cannot be hypnotized.
Right.
Of course.
So
it makes total sense.
If their whole thing is to come in and prove to me that they cannot be hypnotized, they have already decided. So all hypnosis is self-hypnosis. So for example, to explain what hypnosis feels like, go ahead and close your eyes for just a second. Trust me. Now go ahead and open your eyes. And that's a lot like what hypnosis feels like. So you shouldn't expect a blackout. You will be able to hear and understand. And in fact, all hypnosis is self-hypnosis. You are always in control. So like everyday examples of hypnosis to prove that all people, for the most part, unless they have a really low IQ, which means they wouldn't have had enough capability to get to the office, they would be not a good candidate. A person who is drunk is not a good candidate, and a person who wants to prove the hypnotist wrong. So, but an everyday example of hypnosis is if you've driven somewhere, got there, and not remember the last 5 minutes of the drive, right? That is highway hypnosis. Now, I don't recommend driving that way, but it does happen. We didn't black out. We were still aware. We were just hyper-focused to one thing, and that is actually what hypnosis is. It's called monoideaism or singular thought. Okay.
Good old midbrain in action. That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of confusing because the word hypnos in Greek means like sleep. but and they'd already coined the term and it kind of stuck by the time they wanted to change it to monoideism. So it isn't sleep, it is a conscious state, and there is different depths of it in theta brainwave, but the idea is that you've done it before. So another example would be, and you're going to have to humor me here on my singing abilities, but where does this jingle come from? Ba-dum-bum-bum-bum.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Do you know what it is?
100% I do.
Chris,
Yes.
do you know what it is?
Yeah, I do. It took me a second to place it, but yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's the McDonald's jingle, and once you know it, you can't unknow it. So it's kind of like hypnosis. That hypnosis is relaxation, repetition, and fixation. So kind of like learning your ABCs. Once you know your ABCs, you can't unlearn it. And the truth is I'm not actually hypnotizing people. I'm kind of dehypnotizing from the path that they're already on or the track that they're already in. They do this, they do this, they do this, they respond like this. That's hypnosis. We're just simply using the muscles of their mind to create a new track, if that makes sense. Does that answer both of those questions?
Yes, and it creates about 15,000 more. So that's
Fire away.
Great, right? Like, I think this is such an interesting topic because there's so much research, and 100 new books an hour coming out on habit and how to manipulate your habits and how to overcome habit loops. And you could look at James Clear or who's the author of The Power of Habit? There's like a ton of
Charles Duhigg.
Thank you. There's a ton of people doing research on this right now. How do you see hypnosis fitting in to that sort of aspect of what's going on in behavior change and habit management?
Well, I'm not going to talk about anything in specific. I'm gonna like kind of broaden the topic to a bigger idea or a bigger concept. Like everybody is trying to put their mark on things. But the truth is you cannot just use your mind to create change.
What's
that? I love that.
I use with that is imagine that you had a paper bag on your head right now. Like, square paper bag, it's sitting over your head. Now go ahead and think your way out of the paper bag. And if you can do it, I need to take that course.
Right. Yeah.
You cannot manifest that bag off your head. Like you cannot think your way out of the paper bag. You either have to lift it off, you have to blow it off, tip it off. You have to physically do something. So in the MHS clinics, we do focus on that physiology trumps emotion. So you have to do things in order to change the chemical process in your mind to help elicit the change. You can't just think about it and magically quit smoking. You can't just think about it and magically get fit. You can't just think about it and magically have, your stage fright disappear. You have to take actions that help solidify the change.
Yeah.
So how exactly does sorry.
I was just going to say, I can't manifest like a Brinks truck in my front yard offloading cash by thinking about it sitting on my couch.
Right.
You've just like shattered some of my adulthood dreams.
Wow. Yeah. I have a river in a bucket and I use it to think about money flowing into my life. But yes, Brinks truck works too. But you actually have to take action to bring clients into your world, right?
Yeah.
So you can't, the whole field of dreams mentality, if you build it, they will come. Well, no, you have to do more than just build it. You have to start taking action on it, right? Like if we could all get fit sitting on the couch, staring at the TV, that would be fantastic. But you have to do things. So you first have to, design your outcome, and then you have to reverse engineer back from that outcome, what the steps are that you're going to take. You're not trying to figure out the next step. You're first trying to figure out the outcome, but you have to take action, which is what makes it hypnotic. So you hear it, you do it, then you feel good about it.
I'm looking for the right question, but I think it's something around like, obviously hypnosis is not the only step that you go through in this process, right? So is it more like you're planting or you're bringing out an idea that somebody already has about what actions they want to take and then helping them take steps? Or is it like, how do I get a better feel for why this would work for me when something else hasn't? Because action's important, right? That's the key to making these things actually change, like you said.
Right. So for instance, most people are just trying to use willpower to create the change, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't change the mood associated with it, and that is where the hypnosis is accessing the feelings part of the mind, then you can actually help elicit that they would like to do that now.
So you're trying to create more desire for change, or to bring out the desire for change. You're not actually like hypnotizing somebody into doing something different.
Right. So the thing is, you just brought up a very brilliant point, is that you cannot make anybody through hypnosis do something they don't want to do. So for instance, the very most common one that I see is a smoker come in and they'll be like, I want to quit smoking. And I'm like, okay, on a scale of 0 to 10, 0 being you still love it, but you know it's bad for you, because of all the publicity, right? But 10 being you'd quit right now, you hate the smell, you hate the wasted money, like where would you fall on that scale? And if they say anything less than a 7, you understand there's no passion or mojo behind actually quitting. They're looking for a magic wand. And that is, one of the delusions I'd like to blow up, that hypnosis is not a magic wand. I can't just go voila and make it all disappear. People actually have to want the change. But instead of trying to figure out the next step, we're just trying to do everything really hard perfectly. You're actually beginning with the outcome first. Like like if you think of it like a journey, say you're traveling from Toronto to Vancouver, Vancouver is the end goal. And you can think of this like Google Maps. When you put a destination in, what most people do, say they wanted to stop smoking. They put that idea and they open up their Google Maps, but they forget to press go. And so they're just a blue dot like swirling around on the page. But if they actually put the destination in and press go, it auto-populates 3 routes how to get there, right? So it's beginning with the end. And even if you get off track, it just recalculates where they're going to help them design what they're doing. So you have to begin with the end. You will never, ever do anything that you cannot picture in your mind. And it's more than picture. It's actually VAK, visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. And I prefer the idea of using where you've seen people use virtual image goggles where they actually believe that they're in it. So they actually have to believe that they've already can see it, feel it, and imagine it in order to want to chase it. And to give this like a tangible way for you to think about it, think of the last car that you bought or vehicle, or think about the house that you wanted to buy. You first saw it in your mind, and then you began looking for it. But a lot of people will use their changes in their world by just trying to figure out the next step instead of figuring out the end goal. And that is what hypnosis is doing, is focusing on your outcome and what the steps you are, reverse engineering back the steps that you need to take in order to get there. Does that make sense? And then we're associating moods with it, because no change ever happens unless there's a mood with it.
So I love the analogies. You're like really speaking my language here. But I recently heard kind of the phrase of the concept, you can't outwork a faulty belief system. And it was in the context of, especially this time of year, we want to create significant change, but ultimately like the initial surge in dopamine, which we think is motivation, can't really outwork. We end up falling back into the system of beliefs that we hold about ourselves and our sense of identity. And it feels like, in one sense, we're now sort of moving in the direction a little bit of the woo, but there's something to this about our beliefs and how they affect our behavior. And I wonder if you can speak to that.
Well, all change is based on the mood and association with it. So if you go from like neuro-linguistic programming or NLP, you can begin with the idea that everything that a human does begins with a positive intention. Everything we do begins with a positive intention. So if you can think of the example, for instance, say consuming chocolate, for instance, right? The positive intention for consuming the chocolate might have been to, solve boredom or create love and connection, because the first time you ate, chocolate, your grandma gave it to you and you felt like all warm and fuzzy, right? So if you can go back to the mood if you can step back and look at the mood and what you're trying to solve first, I believe that mostly answers the question that you're looking for, John. Does it?
Yeah, and it was the idea that we can't outwork a faulty belief system. In other words, like, and then I think the way that James Clear isn't necessarily speaking on this level, but he's saying like we don't rise to the level of our aspirations, we fall to the level of like our habits and systems. But I think really those are very often steered by, or formed by what we believe is possible. Because I feel as though like we're not going to do something, we're not going to apply effort to something that we don't believe is possible. And so we first have to believe the outcome is even possible to achieve before, because the definition, I don't know if it's the definition of insanity, but it makes no sense logically to pursue something that we know or firmly believe is impossible to achieve.
Right. So you'd have to shift the mood associated with it. And that's why I just keeping coming back to the moods that people are going through. So if they can step back and look at the bigger picture of what they were trying to solve in the first place, it doesn't have to do with right or wrong or good or bad. You just need to give them a different perspective about it, or different options of why they might have that belief system, and kind of like shed some light on it so they can see the bigger picture. Because when they have that faulty belief system, they're in tunnel vision, right? So if we can broaden their scope so that they can see more of the possible reasons why it existed without labeling it, then they could shift and believe that they can change it.
I think this is a really fascinating overlap with one of my favorite topics, as John knows, which is anthropology and this idea of, safety behaviors. Because all of our belief systems develop around keeping ourselves and our loved ones safe. And so you can kind of trace all of these behavior patterns back to some way it's solving a safety problem. So like you brought up chocolate, for example, like, okay, maybe it's a love and affection thing, but maybe your grandma gave you that chocolate because you were sad about something and you don't remember that part, but you remember the feeling that you got from that, which creates the belief system, which then anchors with habit or an action, right? So it's really fascinating that it seems like, I think there's a lot of potentially misunderstanding around what hypnosis actually is, because there's so many popular like cliches about it, right? But what it sounds like it is, from what you're describing, is more, it's another way to sort of, and I hate the word hack, but I'm going to use it. It's a way to just sort of hack into those deeper emotions and get a feel for them in a different way that allows you to potentially change your outcomes.
And then we eliminate the shame cycle, where we decide that however we are, is it useful or is it unuseful? And there's no such thing as right or wrong, and we don't need to condemn ourselves. If it's not working, then let's change it. Let's learn from it. Let's adapt. How can we shift this, right? And that's where we do braid not only hypnotism but NLP together. So it's hypnosis and neurolinguistic programming, to shift where we hold those memories in our mind and move them to a more useful place. So we have stored images in our mind. It's really cool if you get a person to close their eyes and show you where something is in their mind's eye, and then actually physically have them move it, and then go watch their face when it's like, oh my God, that's different over there. And all I had to do was move it in my mind. So, again, you can't think your way out of a paper bag. So analysis to a point is okay, but we don't want solving the why is never going to be the solution. Shedding light, yes, but we don't ever have to figure out exactly why our grandma gave us that piece of chocolate. We can give a large amount of reasons, but remember that whatever happened back then isn't necessarily the truth. It's a fragment of the truth, and it's a snapshot rather than the whole panorama or the 360 video of really what was happening at that time. Maybe we were also sad and there was other things going on. You'll never know. And you could discover it, but it's not going to change anything.
Right. So it's not going to change the now, right?
So the only valid question ever to ask is, how do you want this to go now? Like, what do you want? And if we work that way forward, then you're not living in the rearview mirror, right? You're not looking at the past. The past does not equal the future. It only matters what you want to do with it now. So that might be, all these things that I think what you teach, and what John teaches and what I teach, like we all have like little different pieces, but they braid together into like a bigger whole. And we just need to find like that niche for that person. Right. So some people need to talk about things, and some people need to dissect things, and some people just need to, learn how to take actions. And there's no right way or wrong way to do this. It's just, what works for each person.
It's like it's different entrances to the same cycle, though, isn't it? Because I think the reality is it always ends with action. It has to, or nothing actually changes. Like, I love this. I can't get a paper bag off my head by thinking it away. That's great. Because I mean, it's true. It's like, it's so
totally stealing that.
So powerful to like, be like, yeah, actually, I can't do that. And I think that's sometimes where people get stuck when they start down the road of looking back within themselves about what's going on in their belief systems. You can get really caught in not acting in that place. It can be a really long-term,
I feel like,
deep dive inside if you're not careful.
Like psychological archaeology is a procrastination tool.
Yeah. Psychological archaeology. Is that like scientific assassination?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I try to explain to people. Like, we can use our past experience to kind of inform our present behavior. So at least we understand maybe where it came from, and then remove the judgment from that behavior pattern. Because, okay, well, that's where that came from or whatever. But I try to explain that I'm not a psychological archaeologist. We're not going back there to try and fix that in order to be able to move you forward in the present.
Totally.
Yeah.
And that's this idea of neuroplasticity coming back around, right? Is this idea it's not fixed just because you made this pattern, or I often explain it like it's a cow path. Like if you look at cows in a field, they travel the same line. It's this weird thing. It's a wide open field, but they pick one line and they all go down it, and they run it so many times. It becomes so well grooved. It's a dip in the land. And if you want those cows to go a different way, it's quite a lot of effort. And so it's sort of like neuroplasticity is great because it means that it might be hard to carve a new path if it's really well worn, but you still can do it. And the more tools you have, and potentially if hypnosis is one of them that sounds like it might work for you, it's absolutely worth trying to use it. It doesn't seem like it should be excluded.
So funny, you're speaking my language. So the thing is, I actually use an analogy about gophers too, and about about hypnosis and how we can build a superhighway with hypnosis. So I often talk about the first time you do hypnosis is like, creating a gopher trail, and each time you do hypnosis, like if you think of a computer, like, your computer is always in your mind, or even like your actual computer, but use the analogy that your computer is a mind, right? That it's always looking for the program with the biggest file, right? Yeah. So the first time you do hypnosis, you can imagine that it adds in like 1 gigabyte of data, right? And then it doubles each time you do the hypnosis. So like, it's like 1 and then 2 and then 4 and then 8 and then 16, 32, 64, right? So all of a sudden you got like 64, 132 gigs of data, right? And the content doubles each time by doing hypnosis and activating the subconscious part of your mind. So if you think about your conscious mind as your no mind, so if I tell you, you can have $1 million, your conscious mind goes, no. Oh, I can. I don't have that Brinks truck, right, John? Right?
Yeah.
So that's the conscious mind. That's the no mind. That's the analytical mind. And if you bypass the critical faculty and get to the subconscious mind, and you put in that thought, your subconscious mind is like your yes mind, or your feelings part of your mind. If you think of a child roughly the age of like 6 years old, where they still believe in Santa, that's your yes mind, right? So can you have $1 million? Yes, I can. Can I be a doctor? Yes, I can. Like they believe, right? And you put that thought in there, and you build it and build it and build it. And all of a sudden, your computer in your mind has a bigger file folder of the new system or the new route you're going to take. And all of a sudden, instead of that gopher trail or that cow trail, Chris, like you're talking about, it's like a super highway. Like it's the QE2, right? It's super fast. It's double laned, and it's free flowing. And that's the route that you're going to choose because it's more ingrained, and that hypnosis can help you ingrain it, so to speak. So you can make that cow path a little bit more profound.
So there's something you said really early on that really resonated with me about the childbirth experience. I had a very different childbirth experience, but it was not the one I had planned, and it did not go super well either. And I remember having tremendous feelings of disappointment around the fact that I hadn't been able to like manifest this perfect childbirth. So I'm really curious how you actually, if you could walk us through a little bit more, if you're willing to. I know it's personal, but And without getting like super graphic for the people who have not had children and still have dignity and like boundaries and stuff, but like, how did this apply? Like, how did you take, because it is a tremendous feat to have VBAC, right? So like, how did hypnosis or I can't say hypnotherapy, right? Because that's a no-no, but like, how did this work for you? How did you manifest that?
Yeah. So I'm actually going to use exactly what you said, but I'm going to flip it so that absolutely every single person here could think about this in a different way. Right. So I will begin with the bullet points. My very first, I was like, I don't want this and I don't want that. So I don't want a C-section. I don't want an epidural. I don't want this and I don't want this. Okay. So now let's translate this for the rest of the humans. So every time I said don't, that was like, don't think about a dog.
Oh, dog. Oh, no.
Right? Yeah. So now you just magically thought about the dog. So the thing is your mind cannot process negatives. Yeah. So the beginning steps that need to be taken is to say what you want, not what you don't want. So I had to flip all of my language. And I remember when I first started learning this, like I thought my mind was going to explode because I'm like, oh my God, I say everything in my head wrong. And that is what most people are doing. I can't lose weight, or don't think about the chocolate bar, or I can't quit smoking, right? So it just makes them keep on thinking, or I don't want to smoke. I don't want to smoke. I don't want to smoke. Well, they've just re-elicited that thought because your mind can't take away the negative. So in the beginning, even though it wasn't true, I actually had to say what I wanted, right? So Chris, I had to flip it to, I can easily have a natural childbirth. I can comfortably have, this baby, and, I am capable, I am strong, like I'm flipping the statements to, now I really actually don't care for the phrase affirmations. Because it leaves, it kind of will float back to the, just thinking your way to the paper bag. We do talk about them as autogenic. So yes, saying to yourself the things that you want to have happen. And even if you don't believe it, for instance, right now, if you said to yourself, I am happy 10 times, even if you were sad, by the end of the 10 times, you understand you'd probably have a little bit of a weird smile on your face. And if I made a person do like Superman pose simultaneously and had their chin raised and their eyes raised so that they're actually stimulating glands in their brain, and made them put their, hands on their hips and actually physically move their body while saying, I am happy, you understand, even if they thought it was super silly, they'd be happier by the end of the 10 times, right? So again, this goes back to having the outcome and making it part of the statements of what you want. So I had to say specifically what I wanted to achieve, how I wanted to achieve it. And it was just like, it was an ongoing thought in my mind that became a movie, that became like a virtual image, which is the same kind of technology, of course, as what they use for like Olympic athletes in order to get the gold, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's visualization, right? Like, and we do, one of my athletes is working with a mindset coach and he's doing a lot of this, right? Like,
yeah. But don't just let it be visual. Actually elicit all 5, wherever my camera is, 5 of the senses. So we use VAK, or visual, auditory, kinesthetic, a lot in hypnosis. But, for an athlete, if you also want to get in the smell of, like, say, the sweat, or the taste of the salt on their lips, or the roar of the crowd, or, the sound of their heart pumping in their body, or, if you make it actually real for them, then the mind perceives it as real. And their mind doesn't know the difference between real or imagined. So if you close your eyes and imagine walking upstairs, your mind goes, oh, I just walked upstairs. But if you actually go walk upstairs, your mind perceives it as real. And so that is where hypnosis can elicit that. And your mind can believe that the success model that you just created in VAK, at least, if not all the senses, becomes that real thing that your mind goes, oh, I've already done it. This is the route I'm going to take.
No, if I get, I was going to say, just and I want to jump in and get your thoughts on this. Going back to childbirth, because we went through like a hypnobirthing course, had the affirmations all over the house, meditated together, all this kind of stuff, and really like dove deep into it. And still the birth was like just a messy, it did nothing went according to plan. And
welcome to birth, I think, though. I mean,
yeah,
the more people I talk to about it.
We didn't require surgical intervention, but it was right on the verge of it. And it was messy. And I mean, it's always messy and difficult, but I think in my limited scope of experience, it was more so above average. But why I'm bringing this into it is because maybe there's a sense of, we had the sense of like, we did everything we were supposed to do and really bought into it. And even despite doing everything we did, it still went to poop.
All I know, I can only speak from my experience, and I did teach this program for a very long time. I worked with people, and I know that I cannot have a crystal ball, and I cannot see inside people's minds and what they're actually thinking. So the thing is even if, like, the second time I totally did that, I totally, and I thought I was all awesome, and I did everything that I thought I was doing, but there's so many things that I still hadn't leveled with myself. And the concept of leveling, we think this is super important. It's from Virginia Satir in a book called The New People Making. And they talk about blaming, placating, computing, and distracting your way from success. But if you're actually leveling into what's going on, and you're taking away the blaming and the placating and the computing and the distracting, and actually surrender into the situation, you understand sometimes that was the route that the person had to go through based on what was going on. Maybe the person had some debilitating thoughts that they actually weren't able to get rid of. Maybe there was a series of interventions that happened because of a choice that was made. But again, the biggest thing with women, if we can get them to step back and own what happened, I own 100% what happened to me. Nobody did it to me. I did it to myself. And that might have just been the path that a person needed to take. Sometimes it takes us a little bit longer. It took me 3 times, darn it, to figure out exactly how to do it better.
Yeah.
If I did it full, I don't want to. I'm good. I have 3 awesome children. I'm good. But maybe I wouldn't have learned it. Maybe based on my chemicals in my body, maybe based on, the amount of sleep that I had during that time, it would change. So I think I answer that in a better way.
So why I brought that up, really, and I really appreciate like what you shared there. Why I'm bringing that up is there's going to be these experiences in life. So one of the things that really crushes people is unmet expectations, but usually it's very often misplaced expectations, because there isn't necessarily a guarantee that you can in a sense do all of the right steps, but there isn't necessarily a guarantee that you're going to become the next Elon Musk or I say Elon deliberately, but Chris. Anyways, side note. but it's so maybe to set people up, like there is sort of a finite amount of limitation to this. There's an eventual limit that we reach, no matter how much of this work that we do. And so how do we navigate that? Where we don't undershoot what's possible for us, but we don't set ourselves up for like a crushing disappointment when maybe you didn't get the gold medal, maybe you finished 4th, that kind of thing.
I think I'd like to, before you answer that, I would like to piggyback off of his question, because it's really similar to what I was going to ask. And I think this ties in, and it's this idea of like, is hypnosis putting forth that if you have no emotional barriers and you're 100% in tune with the situation, that you can't get a bad outcome? Or is it, do you know what I'm saying? Like, because it sounds like it's easy from one perspective to say, this is in some way my fault that this situation did not have an optimal outcome. I can always look at myself and decide that that's the case.
Instead of fault, like elimination, the idea of fault and shame and right and wrong and good and bad is really important, because if you label it that way, then there's no way to get out of it. If it's just an experience that you could learn from, then it's just an experience. But I like the word that John used, and the word was navigate. And I actually just did a video about this morning. Instead of stop restarting is the biggest thing. Yes. Stop restarting. Yeah. So think of everything as a journey. And of course, I again use the analogy of driving. Apparently, I drive a lot. But if you're traveling from one destination to another, so if you just use the idea of you're driving from Toronto to Vancouver, and you've been doing everything that you're supposed to do, and you're doing everything that you're supposed to do, and this even works with childbirth or weight loss or stop smoking. You know, darn it, you're going 100 kilometers an hour, and all of a sudden you get to Brandon or even Saskatoon. And oh my God, like either the road's broken or there's construction or I don't know, maybe you hit a snowstorm. Well, you don't just go back to Toronto, right? You can either go 30, you can change courses and head a completely different direction. Maybe you want to go to Vegas, or maybe you just reroute and, you know, keep going, right? But the point is not to go back to the beginning. Once you know how to ride a bicycle, just because you fall off doesn't mean you need training wheels again. And everything is just an experience. So, you know, if you use the story of what John was talking about, you know, birth was messy for them, that just because it happened doesn't mean you wouldn't not have another baby again, right? Each time a different journey, right? So if we looked at it like, no, I'm throwing the baby out with the bathwater, I'm never doing that again, right? But you know, you could at least choose like a different destination and realize that once you're en route, you know, it's okay to change your mind, but you have to have something to chase. So no, life isn't perfect. You're going to get thrown curveballs. You know, there's going to be everything from as little as somebody getting sick to somebody passing away. But the question is always, how do you want it to go? Do you want to keep, what do you want to chase? How do you want this to go from here? Right? Does that help when you think of it?
Yeah, no, I think I was asking it from the point of view of more of, I think one of the dangers of stepping into something like this is that it's an expectation that if I do this right, if I get hypnotherapy or hypnosis right, then I can control the outcomes in my life. And that's where I was kind of poking around, because I think it's dangerous for that reason, because most people, when they're looking for change, are looking for an outcome, right? They're saying, I want this outcome from this behavior. And it feels like most things try to set up some kind of guarantee. If you do these things, then these things will happen. And I think my point was more of like, you can't always guarantee the outcome. And it's what you're saying. It is about the journey and accepting that, like, okay, I did the things and I did what I felt was the right thing. And I did things with an open heart and an open mind and all of that. And I still had this other outcome. Like, now what do I do? It sounds like it's more what you're saying rather than, yeah, no, if you got hypnosis right, or if you did everything you could do in hypnosis, then nothing bad would ever happen to you. So that's, I just wanted to clarify that, because I think there was, I don't believe that that's what you were saying, but I heard an opportunity for somebody to interpret it in that way. So I just wanted to make sure that, like, that was the case.
Correct. So again, it's the exclusion of that idea of right. There is no right way to do this. And we'll throw, like, I will help that client throw spaghetti on the wall, so to speak, or spitball a whole bunch of ideas, because there isn't a right solution. But once they determine where they want to go, they can shift it. Even if it's wrong, if it wasn't the right, I hate the word right. If it wasn't the outcome that they decided that they need now, they can shift that outcome, right? So lots of people will start in a program and then they'll be like, no, I actually really need some stress release. And I'll be like, great, let's work on your stress, right? So the thing is if we can decrease other aspects of their life where they can feel calmer, more confident, more in control, then the other aspects of their life get better also. So it's not just becoming about one thing or one action. It is about looking at multiple opportunities or looking at the bigger picture and going, and in fact, you know, a lot of programs are, you do this and only this and only this, and this is how we achieve that. But the truth is, you know, we have to have like multiple different ways of approaching it. And each person has to choose that on their own. And that is the biggest thing, is that hypnosis isn't choosing how they do it. Once they decide how they're doing it, we can help them elicit the belief that they can make that change. And if they decide that that isn't the change they wanted, then we shift to the change that is more useful at that time. And yeah, we prefer the more useful or rather than right or wrong, because it is very definitive, and it's just an opportunity to learn from. So
This is something John and I both work a lot on with our clients, as well as this idea of, right, wrong, or good, bad foods, particularly when talking about nutrition. The idea of good or bad foods is really damaging for the same kinds of reasons. And it's not that there aren't foods that do more to promote your body's optimal function and less to promote your body's optimal function. It's just when you're moralizing these things, it creates a fixed mindset, which then it's hard to move forward from.
Right. But you have to have some flexibility in whatever plans, right? And the whole idea is to create the flexibility that's best for the client, right? So,
and unfortunately, I think it comes back to safety again, because it's like the more what's the word I want? The more concrete or definite the outcome is, the safer it feels to take the action. And so it's trying to convince people that just because the outcome isn't guaranteed, it's not worth taking the action. So, I think there's a lot of overlap between what it is you're talking about working on with clients and what John and I talk about as well. Right. Would you agree?
Yeah. So, the funny thing is like when you, like, we do offer what's called a service guarantee for some of the programs. And I'll ask clients, am I guaranteeing that you quit smoking? And they're like, no. And I'm like, whose responsibility is it to quit smoking? Getting the client to take the responsibility themselves. Right. So I'm sure you guys are all about empowering the clients to take the actions themselves. I mean, we can't hold their hand. It's going to cost a lot more money for us to chase them around.
Well, I use the analogy. I'm a tour guide, not a Sherpa.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So if we can empower them to notice that they're the ones who have to take that actions and in a flexible way. So the person with the most flexibility is the person who's going to change the most. So, and is in control of the situation. So if we can be flexible on the approach for them based on their needs, then they're going to more likely reach the goals that they need instead of being rigid and stuck to one thing.
Yeah, that's amazing. And there's a lot more that we could cover here. And we missed the opportunity to dive into hypnosis in the medical context, but I think that's a good excuse to bring you back in for another conversation. Because I'm sure Chris feels the same way. I've really enjoyed picking your brain, and I've made a whole bunch of notes here because I love analogies, and I'm like, sweet, I've got more for my analogy tool bag here. I'm totally stealing some of these things that you've shared with us, so it's been super awesome.
I wish I could say they were all mine. A lot of my master trainer had created a lot of them, so you hear them enough, I repeat them.
Yeah. So, any final words of wisdom you'd like to share to wrap up, thinking about what we've discussed today?
Yeah, there was only one other thing that I created an offer that if anybody, wanted to experience hypnosis, I do offer a free hypnosis download so that they could experience hypnosis in the comfort of their own home. And like I said, there's also that free screening, which can be done online or in person. But if they would like that free audio, they can just email me at hypnosisab@gmail.com. And then I'll be happy to send a free audio their way, and they can experience hypnosis and see if it's right for them.
That's awesome. We'll make sure we put that in the comments below as well. So thank you so much for joining us. Any last thoughts, Chris, before we sign off? Looks like just putting on the spot.
A little bit of background events happening, so I'm distracted. It's literally about time to pick up my daughter, so there's been emailing. It's snowing, so sorry about that. I think this was really interesting because I have to say I don't know that much about hypnosis at all, and my cousin got hypnotized to lose weight at one point, and I can remember having a really interesting conversation with her about it. And it was at an event, a family event, and she was like basically saying, "Yeah, I don't want carbs anymore, but I'll have another espresso martini." And I was like, "Interesting." And it's always been in the back of my mind, and I really enjoyed talking with you. I think it was really eye-opening, and I hope that people listening really have a different perspective of what it actually means to use this as a tool. Thank you so much. I think it would be really cool to have another conversation. I'd love to discuss more in depth the actual functions in the brain that happen because I loved the analogy about, I drove somewhere and I didn't realize I'd done it, and that's hypnosis, because that is a whole area of brain function that we often overlook and is deeply rooted in how our habits play out, right? So yeah, this was super fun. It made me think of like lots of questions. I was taking notes on all the questions I wanted to ask you that we didn't quite get to. So
you're definitely going to be a repeat guest then.
Thank you guys very much for having me today. And it's been a pleasure and a blast. Thank you.
We are starting this Health Academy, try to start to change the narrative around what it means to get healthy and fit and to lead a fulfilling life. Because in the end, this is what our clients come to us for, whether they think they want a six-pack or not, right? Like for the vast majority of people, if they do manage to achieve that goal, they still are the same person they were before they had a six-pack. And a lot of the issues that they were feeling haven't been resolved. So
there's mindsets, beliefs, identities, and we have to bring them into our conscious awareness if we're going to create change. The process of bringing it into our conscious awareness can be uncomfortable because now we're going to see our flaws as they are. We're going to see ourselves without the filter, but with compassion, we can look at it with a curious desire to understand. And so compassion and awareness is where we create transformation.